TNA No Surrender 2010 pay-per-view review. Pretty good pay-per-view outing from TNA, I gotta say. Overall, with this pay-per-view, had two great matches on it. The Generation Me versus Madison Machine Guns for the Tag Team Championships. Great match and a great way to start the pay-per-view. Really got the crowd into the show. And then the Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy match was a very good match of the night, in my opinion. And the only problem, and the only thing I can complain with that match is it wasn't the main event. But considering the way it was booked, since they did the 20-minute time limit, then gave it 5 more minutes, went to another 5-minute overtime, and then was ruled a no contest after Kurt Angle had a big gash on it. Maybe TNA and their booking staff would have said, this might not be the perfect way to end the pay-per-view with a time limit draw. And after that, I would have hated to be not Desmond, but the Pope D'Angelo, De Niro, or Mr. Anderson having to go out there and try to out-top it. They didn't have a great match, but considering having to follow up from that match, they did a pretty good job, I gotta say. I gotta say Anderson and Pope D'Angelo, De Niro actually went out there, had a pretty solid match, kind of the match you would expect from them too, but after the previous match, there were some points you couldn't completely get into it because you were blown out from the previous match, but still they went out there, performed at their best, and considering they came off after that match, I give them a lot of credit, and I guess they wanted to build up Mr. Anderson going into Bound for Glory really hard before Bound for Glory and build him up very strong as a main eventer, and they wanted him to main event this for that reason, and considering the other one, they probably thought maybe it wouldn't have been smart to end in a time limit draw for a pay-per-view, but I wouldn't have had no problem with it. I know some people might have completely hated it, but I wouldn't have had any problem with it, especially since Jeff Hardy and Kurt Angle went out there, had a hell of a match, had such a great match that I would say it's a match of the year candidate, and as with that as well. It's a match I would highly recommend to check out with the opening match as well, which the opening match of the pay-per-view was Generation Me versus the Madison Machine Guns for the Tag Team Championships. Very good match, good back-and-forth action, really enjoyed it. Good way to start the pay-per-view off. The crowd was really into it, cheering for both teams. Just a lot of great stuff in this match. These two teams have very good chemistry, and the Madison Machine Guns pick up the victory after hitting the Skull and Bones, the neck breaker, not springboard, but the neck breaker crossbody combo. And then after the match, the Generation Me, they beat down the Madison Machine Guns. They take out Alex Shelley. So don't know if this is going to be writing off Alex Shelley, because I think Alex Shelley does have a little some injuries right now. So hopefully this isn't writing them off, and hopefully this is just adding more fuel to the fire and having another match at Bound for Glory in October, which could be a great match. This match was very good. Would love to see these two in a tag team feud, possibly a tag team feud for at least 3 or 4 months, because Generation Me and most Machine Guns can have great matches all the time. This is just a very good match, fun way to start the pay-per-view. 3 3/4 stars. Then the next matchup was Sabu versus Douglas Williams for the X Division Championship, and this was a good match. It was actually going on pretty good. I actually enjoyed it. Sabu actually, I would say, came out there, and he wasn't as good as he was at his match against RVD the previous month, but you got to figure he's taking on Douglas Williams. I like Douglas Williams, but him and RVD are completely different competitors in the ring. And you saw some good mat work at the beginning, and the only thing I had a problem with this match was the ending of this match. Considering, you had hardcore stuff involved in this match. You saw a chair involved in this match. There was a table spot in this match, even though with the table spot, Sabu was going for his Arabian facebuster, and Doug Williams got out of the way. So I guess you could say that the match couldn't end disqualification due to that reasoning. But then at one point you saw Douglas Williams at the end of the match. He was getting a chair. He was going to try to hit Sabu with it. The referee, grabs it from him, pulls out the ring. Then he grabs the X Division title belt when the referee isn't looking, hits Sabu with it, and that's the ending of the match. Now, I know Douglas Williams. He's a heel, and it's a typical type of way he would try to win by any means necessary. But they were actually going on to have a pretty good match against each other, and the ending of the match just killed it for me. I actually was enjoying the match a lot, and the ending killed it for me. You still saw some good stuff in it, and since you saw that, I would still give it, 2 1/4 stars, but the ending of it really killed it for me as far as the quality of the match. Then the next matchup was Velvet Sky versus Madison Rayne in a grudge match. really a match I could care less about. Velvet Sky, she picks up the victory in this match. 1 star match at best. TNA really needs to try to do something with their knockouts division, get it back to where it was that, originality to it, where you actually saw great women's matches or very good women's matches, not just the typical Divas matches, which the knockouts division has turned into just a WWE Diva Light. That's pretty much what it is. And they're not really, going out there and trying to differentiate themselves from the WWE Divas, which I think was the thing that you had with the knockouts division at first. That was the good thing about it. It had the originality to it and was making it seem different than the typical women's wrestling you would see on WWE. But now it's gone the route where they're going the typical WWE route with the tits and action route, where they're just going by, female wrestlers could, go out there and they're just there for their looks. They cannot perform in the ring at all. Velvet Sky, if she's in there with someone that, Velvet Sky and Madison Rayne, they're both women's wrestlers that if they're in there with someone like, that can perform, they could possibly have a good match, but against each other, it was pretty much a train wreck, and I think that's what most people were expecting. Definitely the worst match of the night. Then the next matchup was Rhino versus Abyss in the Falls Count Anywhere match. This match kind of dragged on, I would say. It wasn't a terrible match. I would put it in the category of a watchable match. It had some decent stuff in it, but it kind of got over the top. They did stuff where they broke one part of the stage. They were fighting under the stage, and they popped out the other side. Really looked really cartoonish when they did that. And then the end of the match comes where they had a guardrail placed up in one of the corners of the ring. Rhino was going for the gore. Abyss moved out of the way, and then he hit the guardrail. And then Abyss hit him with the Black Hole Slam, and Abyss picks up the victory. And I would say about 1.5, maybe 1 3/4 stars. There was some decent stuff with it, but I think for a Falls Count Anywhere match, they could have done a whole lot more and done some more hardcore stuff in the match. Then the next matchup was, I think, a match that, other than the women's match going into this pay-per-view, probably a match that no one was caring about. This was Kevin Nash and Sting, which I'll dub as Wolfpack 2010 versus Jeff Jarrett and Samoa Joe. So you got pretty much 3 old fucks in Samoa Joe. That's pretty much what this tag match is. Samoa Joe, he was in there. When he was in there, even when he was in there, the match wasn't enjoyable. I couldn't get into it at all. The end of the match comes when Samoa Joe gets Sting in the Conquista Clutch submission maneuver. Before that, Jeff Jarrett hits Sting with a baseball bat, and then Sting just passes out in the submission hold from Samoa Joe. So Samoa Joe and Jeff Jarrett pick up the victory in this match. 1.5 stars at best, and that might be a little too generous for that match. The next matchup was AJ Styles versus Tommy Dreamer in the I Quit match. Now, this might be a match that I probably enjoyed more than some. Now, I will agree with some people. Probably what they'll say about this match is some people probably will say that the match could have been cut a little shorter and kind of dragged out in some portions of it. But I'll say towards the middle of the match, especially the end of the match, it really started picking up. I enjoyed it. The thing that Tommy Dreamer did, he put AJ Styles in the put him in the crossface while having the Singapore cane over his face, just good, and cracked it over his face while he had him in it. That was good, and just some pretty entertaining stuff in here for an I Quit match. And for a Tommy Dreamer match, I actually got to say, 2 months in a row, Tommy Dreamer has actually really surprised me. I know some people didn't like the Dreamer versus Raven match from last month as much as I did, but I actually enjoyed this AJ Styles versus Tommy Dreamer match. The match ends after Tommy Dreamer says I quit, after AJ Styles is he has a fork and he's grating Tommy Dreamer's head with it, and Tommy Dreamer says I quit then. Pretty entertaining match, 2 3/4 stars. I enjoyed it. The next matchup was the match of the night. This was Jeff Hardy versus Kurt Angle in the semifinals match of the tournament to crown the new TNA World Heavyweight Champion. The winners of the semifinals matches will advance to take on each other at the Bound for Glory pay-per-view. This match with Jeff Hardy and Kurt Angle, just a great match. So many spots in this match, it's too many to name. At first, they did it where Kurt Angle, he missed his he went for the moonsault, missed it. Jeff Hardy went for the Swanton Bomb, missed it. They did their finishers a number of times in this match. Kurt Angle was really working over the leg, and Jeff Hardy in this match had him in the ankle lock for a long time. Probably one of the longest times you've probably seen Kurt Angle apply the ankle lock ever. Jeff Hardy, he did his Swanton bomb dive from the top rope to the floor on Kurt Angle, hit it perfectly. That was a great spot in this match. Just the first 20 minutes, it ended in a 20-minute draw. The first 20 minutes were great. Then they did some good stuff, and after that, when it was given 5 more minutes, did some good stuff there. Was given another 5 minutes, then it ended in a draw, not a draw, but ended in a no contest because then they got the paramedics out there. Kurt Angle during the second overtime, after the second 5 minutes was allowed in this match, he was bleeding profusely. He had a big gash on his head, and due to that, they said the match couldn't continue, and the match was going to be ruled a no contest. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. Obviously, we know what happens with the Anderson and De Niro match, with Anderson advancing there. But what are they going to do? Are they going to do a 3-way at Bound for Glory, or are they going to do something on Impact where they have Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy in another match against each other on Impact with no time limit, and have them wrestle each other again in another great match on TV on Impact, and then advance to take on Mr. Anderson? We'll just have to wait and see. And actually, this really sucks for TNA because this actually has that feeling of you're wondering really what's going to happen on Impact this Thursday. Now, I know you got spoilers and stuff, but still, for the most part, for casual fans, you got the feeling of what's going to happen next. Most fans are going to really wonder what's going to happen next, but Impact this Thursday is being preempted, so you're not going to have Impact again till the following Thursday on September 16th. That really sucks for TNA, especially right after a pay-per-view. Now, if this is any other time, it probably wouldn't really affect them much, but after a pay-per-view, it's like that really sucks. They have to preempt Impact, and you'll have to wait basically another 10 days, unless you read the spoilers, to find out what happens, where they lead this to on Impact. So that's kind of the one thing that really sucks for TNA right there, and that's nothing they can help right there. But this Jeff Hardy versus Kurt Angle match was a great match, ended in no contest. Like I said, I hit 4 1/4. I overly enjoyed this match. It passed my expectations a lot. Just loved it a lot, and I would highly recommend people to check that match out and the opening match with the Madison Machine Guns versus Generation Me. Then after that, you had the main event, which was the second semifinals match, which was Mr. Anderson versus the Pope D'Angelo De Niro, which, like I said earlier, I feel really bad for them for having to go out there and try to out-top or try to go out there and showcase themselves after that great match that Jeff Hardy and Kurt Angle had right there before it. But considering that, and the crowd was, the crowd was still into the match. I gotta say, they're really into the Pope D'Angelo De Niro and Mr. Anderson, so that helped it right there. But I gotta say, other than probably being there live, most fans were probably, at home kind of watching this and kind of blown out from the previous match, so you kind of weren't, into this match as much as the previous match, obviously. But considering, after they had to go out there and perform after the previous match, they did a pretty good job. I mean, I would say they had a solid 3-star match. Mr. Anderson picks up the victory after hitting 2 mic checks to the Pope D'Angelo De Niro. Pretty good match. Like I said, I guess they wanted to build up Anderson very strong going into Bound for Glory, and since the previous match ended in a no contest, I guess maybe they thought that shouldn't be the way the pay-per-view ends. And that's probably the reasoning why they didn't have Jeff Hardy and Angle main event. So I kind of understand it. They wanted to build up Anderson very strong, and they probably want to send the crowd home happy and the people watching on pay-per-view happy as well, without having to end in a no contest and stuff, which kind of makes sense. I wouldn't have no problem with the pay-per-view end it like that, but I know some people probably would have. So since you had those 2 matches, the Madison Machine Guns match versus Generation Me, which I gave 3 3/4 stars. Then you had the Jeff Hardy match, which I gave 4 1/4 stars with Kurt Angle. Those 2 matches definitely worth checking out this pay-per-view for those 2 matches. You had a number of things that were flaws with the pay-per-view and stuff that wasn't great on here, but those 2 matches were good. And I would say, other than the ending with the X Division title match with Douglas Williams versus Sabu, that was going on pretty good. And actually, AJ and Tommy Dreamer was actually surprisingly good. And like I said, the only thing that was really bad on here was the women's match. Could have completely dealt without that. And the NWO 2010 versus Jeff Jarrett and Samoa Joe. It wasn't a god-awful match, but it was a match I really couldn't quite get into, and I could have dealt without that. But everything else was pretty good. I mean, even the Abyss and Rhino, even though we've seen it millions of times, it was at least watchable. So overall, I'll give this pay-per-view probably about a 7 out of 10 because mainly you had 2 matches on here that you possibly could say are match of the year candidates, and for a mainstream pay-per-view or any show in general having that, it gets a passing grade just for that, even though you had some, lackluster stuff on it in between those matches. So that's it for my TNA No Surrender 2010 pay-per-view review. Peace. 20-minute time limit, then gave it 5 more minutes, went to another 5-minute overtime, and then was ruled a no contest after Kurt Angle had a big gash on it. Maybe TNA and their booking staff would have said, this might not be the perfect way to end the pay-per-view with a time limit draw. And after that, I would have hated to be not Desmond, but the Pope D'Angelo, De Niro, or Mr. Anderson having to go out there and try to out-top it. They didn't have a great match, but considering having to worry and build him up very strong as a main eventer, and they wanted him to main event this for that reason, and considering the other one, they probably thought maybe it wouldn't have been smart to end in a time limit draw for a pay-per-view, but I wouldn't have had no problem with it. I know some people might have completely hated it, but I wouldn't have had any problem with it, especially since Jeff Hardy and Kurt Angle went out there, had a hell of a match, had such a great match that I would say it's a match of the year candidate, and as with that as well, my TNA No Surrender 2010 pay-per-view review. Pretty good pay-per-view outing from TNA, I gotta say. Overall, with this pay-per-view, had 2 great matches on it. The Generation Me versus Madison Machine Guns for the Tag Team Championships. Great match and a great way to start the pay-per-view. Really got the crowd into the show. And then the Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy match was a very good match of the night, in my opinion. And the only problem, and the only thing I can complain with that match is it wasn't the main event. But considering the way it was booked, since they did the, it's a match I would highly recommend to check out with the opening match as well, which the opening match of the pay-per-view was Generation Me versus the Madison Machine Guns for the Tag Team Championships. Very good match, good back-and-forth action, really enjoyed it. Good way to start the pay-per-view off. The crowd was really into it, cheering for both teams. Just a lot of great stuff in this match. These two teams have very good chemistry, and the Madison Machine Guns pick up the victory after hitting the Skull and Bones, the neck breaker spring follow-up from that match. They did a pretty good job, I gotta say. I gotta say Anderson and Pope D'Angelo and Odera actually went out there, had a pretty solid match, kind of the match you would expect from them too. But after the previous match, there were some points you couldn't completely get into it because you were blown out from the previous match, but still they went out there, performed at their best, and considering they came off after that match, I give them a lot of credit, and I guess they wanted to build up Mr. Anderson going into Bound for Glory really hard before Bound for Glory.